On this episode of Queer Sports, competing internationally is a must for many elite athletes. How do LGBTQ athletes deal with being out in hostile environments? Olympians Raven Saunders and Matthew Mitchum, former WNBA player Tai Young, and sports journalist Michael Vopel weigh in. A top sailing team competes in Don't Say Gay, Florida. And we talk with Olympian Adam Rippon about speaking truth to power and finding love abroad. Welcome to Queer Sports. I'm Ariel Dimross, and we're talking about athletes playing abroad. The most recent Olympics were the most queer Olympics in history. It had the largest number of openly LGBTQ athletes to ever compete. So if you counted up all of their medals as if they were a country, they would have placed 7th in the world, which is amazing, right? Athletes train their entire lives to compete internationally in events like the Olympics or the World Cup. It can be the pinnacle of glory for an athlete. Raven, you've been to the Olympics. What's it like competing on a global stage?
I mean, there's no other place that you can go in the world where you get to meet thousands of other athletes who are at the top of their game, and we're all in one centralized location. The energy you feel when you walk out and you know that you're representing something that's a lot bigger than yourself it's momentous in that moment. Like, it's everything.
What's that like for you, Matthew?
Michael and I were discussing, what it was like in Beijing. And, I used to compete in China all the time because, diving's their national sport. And China itself is so, culturally, it's so different that it's like the most alien experience. So, culturally, it's fantastic to compete all over the world. But in terms of the quality of the competition, you're competing against the best in the entire world, which it just makes it a whole lot more exciting.
So do you love it?
Love it, absolutely love it. That's one part I do miss about, being in retirement. Not so much the anxiety of competition, but the exciting part of it. And, I guess it feels kind of the same, doesn't it? When you're young, anxiety feels like excitement. And the older you get, it just turns into anxiety.
Tai, you've played in a bunch of countries, right?
Yes.
What was that experience like for you?
It was a blessing. It was one of the dopest experiences because you're playing in these just different countries and you're also seeing the different countries where I wouldn't have never been if I wasn't playing basketball. You're experiencing different foods, different languages that you're learning. So it was a phenomenal experience for my 12 years of playing.
And it's not just you're going there for a single game. You live there in those countries, right? How many countries have you lived in?
So many: Turkey, Israel, China, Spain, Latvia, Brazil, and you're living there 7 to 8 months out of the year. So you're actually living in those countries more than you are here in the United States. It builds character, it builds, independence because you're in a foreign country without your family. They come visit, but for the most part, you're living there, like I said, more than you are here in the United States. And the experience that I've had with the teams, the support, the love from the teams and from the owners and from the fans, it was amazing to see those packed gyms and you hear the yelling and the different flags. It was a super amazing experience.
The last Olympics were held in Beijing, China, a country that has been called out for its anti-LGBTQ laws. Should these types of laws be disqualifying for a host country? Michael, I know that this has been a debate. What do you think? Where do things stand on that?
It's 100% a money decision. I'll be honest with you, I don't necessarily trust the IOC to make the moral decision over the money decision. It's the corporations, which are so big a part of, the financing of the Olympics. I think maybe that's where we look to more because you do have to think about athlete safety in some of these nations and also athletes' mental health, where they're going to compete. So ultimately, what I think is the athlete's voice has to be heard more on these issues. For many years, it was completely ignored. I feel like we're finally getting to a point where athletes have more of a voice about things like this, like where they're going to compete and where they're comfortable competing.
I had the opportunity to compete in Russia, but because of all the stories I heard and all the things that, I knew about Russia, I was like, no, that's not one of the 10 meets that I'm going to. But when it does come to a major event such as the Olympics, then it's a larger thing to be taken into account, such as going in for representation. And then what are the limitations of what you can and can't do? Like he was saying, when it comes to your safety, that's also a bigger thing once you represent something that that country may not support. It makes it very tough.
Okay, you packed a lot into the answer. So I just want to break some of that down. You specifically refused to go to Russia for one of your meets.
Yeah.
You decided, I'm not going to go to that one.
Yeah.
Tell me about that decision.
So we get a list of all of our track meets for the year. And you know which ones typically pay what amount or are going to pay pretty decently. And Russia was one of the ones that was on the list. They had the women's shot put, but automatically it's like a harsh no. Just because I just knew something could go wrong, and this isn't the place that I would like for it to go wrong in, is how I looked at it. So anytime when looking at my track and field schedule, especially when trying to account for those 10, you have to be very mindful of the places that you are going. Certain places you have to go to because of contractual obligations, but those typically aren't any places crazy. But outside of that, yeah.
What is it like for you as a basketball player to go and spend, 8 months in a foreign country as a queer basketball player especially, or as a Black woman, right?
No, for sure. I think of an experience traveling abroad where my partner at the time, we're getting a hotel, I have an away game, and they're like, oh, do you need a double bed room? And I'm like, no, one bed is good, and they're putting emphasis on giving us a double bed because they see me and they see my lady friend and they just assume that we're just friends. And I'm like, no, we don't want a double bed.
Yeah.
We want one bed. So I think of those times as well. It's like she's saying, like you're just being yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely been there too. Yeah. It's like, no, actually one bed, please. Thank you very much for making it weird.
Right.
Have you had to tone anything down about yourselves? Like, have you had to butch it up or femme it up? Like,
I haven't in any of the countries that I played in, but I hear of stories from other countries and other people who kind of hide themselves, for their safety.
There's no butching this up. Just going to be honest, but you do have to watch So, yeah, I think laws should be more about behaviors rather than the people themselves. And so, if unfortunately I have had to change, or be mindful about my behavior. And sometimes that's something that you have to accept with other cultures. But, telling people that they just shouldn't have sex when they go to watch the World Cup, with whoever they're with, even in their own hotel room, is kind of, I think a bit too much, because sex is part of who you are.
Can sporting events and athletes be used to help open the minds of countries with rigid anti-LGBTQ laws? Do you think that your presence there makes a difference?
Oh, completely. I feel like just by seeing that you're there lets them know that there's a spot open for them in that space as well, which gives them then the confidence to go off after that spot because you've been the person that opened the door for them. And I feel like that's always been the case for athletes coming through.
Representation matters. So it's much more effective for an athlete to be there and to represent in terms of being a role model than not going, because then you're basically eliminating your sphere of influence.
So what about boycotts? Matthew, how do they affect athletes, right? When a country says, you know what, we're not going to go to this other country because of their laws.
What I found interesting, a couple of weeks ago, I was inducted into the International Swimming Hall of Fame. And at that same event, the Hall of Fame decided to honor all of the American swimmers who were supposed to go to the 1980 Olympics, who missed out on that Olympic Games. And, it was just so sad to hear these athletes tell their stories. They never got their chance. A lot of these athletes, they were at the peak and they were expected to get a gold medal around then, and they didn't get that either. And so it really just punishes the athletes. It doesn't punish the country, who you're boycotting. It only punishes the athletes, and that's not fair.
Ty, what do you think? What does it mean for you to be able to go play abroad and represent?
a lot of time the people who do it before you are paving a way for the people that's coming after. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I feel when we are together and take a stand together, that's when changes start to happen. And you think about Kaepernick's situation, he was taking a stand for what he believed in. And some people were with him and some people wasn't. And then when everyone came together and started doing it, then changes started to happen. So I feel like there's always one who is willing and will be willing to take that fall to pave the way for others.
Michael, I think that like in sports, there's this idea of like that a lot of societal change can occur through sports. Is that also true abroad? Like, is there a history here that we can point to?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think so. I think part of that sometimes is just people, even if they're not, say, actively presenting something, they're just being themselves. That makes a difference because I guess I'm a believer that a lot of change, it happens on a macro and a micro level. There are people, I guarantee you there are kids who watched Matthew win a gold medal in Beijing and related to him. He doesn't have to say, hey, I'm gay. They just see him. They see his grace. They see the way he carries himself, and they see themselves in that. And that it's empowering. I know because Ty has so many, covering the WNBA, there's so many fans that love the way that Ty dresses, the way that she plays. Like she has so many fans that are empowered. Same with Raven. Just being there and being yourself, even if you don't have to say, hey, I'm gay or I'm trans, but I'm just gonna be me, I'm not gonna put on an act, is changing the world.
I feel like the thing that we're not talking about right now is Brittany Griner, right? You know, her conviction, her imprisonment. Is that something that is on your minds as well? I mean, does that impact you guys?
Yeah, especially as a member of the community, and also her being another elite level athlete and understanding what it's like competing in foreign countries is something that it's unimaginable, and scary to think about it, especially like Russian prison, man. Like, and the thought of having to stay away from your family, like she said, not knowing when you're gonna come home, career, I'm pretty sure is the last thing on anybody's mind.
I've known Brittany since she was 18, when she was at Baylor. And Ty knows this. Brittany is a really sweet woman, a very sweet, very kind woman. And she's been very open about mental health struggles that she's had.
Yeah.
And kind of like Raven said, at this point, you're not even thinking so much about her career. But in some ways I am also, because she's 32. She just had her 32nd birthday. She's lost a whole season. She lost what I'm sure would have been a trip to the World Cup in Australia, where she would have represented the United States. So she's lost some important career milestones.
And to think of the amount of years that she's actually played in Russia is tough.
We'll be right back. Regarding Brittany Griner's conviction and imprisonment, her coach, Vanessa Nygaard, said, if it was LeBron, he'd be home, right? It's a statement about the value of women. It's a statement about the value of a Black person. It's a statement about the value of a gay person. All of those. We know it. Ty, what do you think about what Vanessa said?
They're using her basically like a pawn. And I feel they would do that with LeBron as well, for what Russia wants.
So is it because she's American, you think?
Yeah.
For sure. And there are other Americans there locked up as well, you know, that we've been talking about fighting to bring back home. The crime is not matching up with the time.
What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, I tend to agree with Ty on this, in that I think she's been a political pawn since they realized what they had there. And because of the timing now with the Russians' war on Ukraine, I understand that people are worried that not enough's being done for Brittany, but I think that's been very complicated.
Yeah.
Early on, her agent and everyone involved with this situation literally came to the media and said, don't talk about it very much. We're trying to get her out as quickly as possible. So really, a lot of us honestly did follow that. We didn't tweet about it very much. Same way with the WNBA players. Some fans were saying, why are the WNBA players being so quiet? They had been asked
it was
the
a strategic
same
thing. It was,
absolutely.
I've had people
let's
comment.
not blow this up and sort of like poke the bear, right? The bear specifically being Russia.
Right.
Like, let's
Very
not
true.
make this bigger than it is. Let's just try and get her out quietly.
Yeah. And then when it became clear they were not going to do that, she was not going to have any choice in terms of pleading. She had to plead guilty. There was no other thing she could do. Once everybody was really aware what they were doing to her and there was no longer any chance of this sort of being negotiated quickly, that's when you saw a lot more, public trying to help in any way. Her trial is a joke. I mean, it really is. And for the amount of cannabis oil she had was basically a misdemeanor, even in that country, even in Russia. The punishment does not fit the crime. It's an absurdly harsh punishment. We're in a bizarre time in our country where a significant number of Americans have somehow become pro-Russia, which, as somebody who grew up during the Cold War, I never thought would happen. But the fact that Britney, as a lot of people did, spoke about the national anthem and the Black Lives Matter movement and the things that we really experienced in 2020, every time we run a story, and probably any media outlet runs a story, it's filled with filth underneath that of people who say, oh no, she should stay there. She didn't like her country. She hates America. And it's that, I think, is what bothers me a lot, is she doesn't have the support of her country. A country, by the way, that she's won gold medals for, and has represented with pride. She had apparently the audacity to question America. And so now we have people, saying that she belongs in a Russian jail.
And that she deserves this.
Yes. Yeah.
We know that WNBA players go abroad to make money, right? Like, we know that there's a huge pay gap issue. The average WNBA player makes $130,000 a year versus NBA players who make $4.3 million on average. Michael, do you think that a higher pay at home would save WNBA players from having to put themselves in harm's way in this way?
It would. I think the question is that economically feasible for the league? That's what it always comes back to, because obviously the league started in 1997, and players at that point have been playing overseas for many, many years, a couple of decades actually. So while we would love to see that, at this point I think the league is where it can be right now. I mean, its most recent collective bargaining agreement was 2020, and salaries did go up then. The other thing that the league has tried to do the last few years, and especially going back to the collective bargaining agreement, is have marketing agreements with the players during the off season, if you will. So that's additional money. Ty knows this. Some players actually coach. They go back to their alma mater sometimes and play. There are some players I think genuinely love to go overseas. Some hate it. Some I think I've talked to are like, this gave me a chance to experience a lot of different things.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. I guess the short answer is yes, it would help, but I don't think the league is in that position right now to drastically increase salaries.
So what would it take?
The league has to get more popular. It has to grow. Ty's part of Athletes Unlimited, which is an organization I'm sure she can talk a lot about. I really enjoyed watching it last year.
You're one of the founders, right?
Yeah, we have a player executive committee. Athletes Unlimited is a players-led league. So it's 5 of us on the committee who we go around and almost like a GM with getting players to play in this league. Last year was our first year in Las Vegas, and this year we're playing in Dallas. It's a 6-week league, and each week the teams change. So there's a leaderboard where the top 4 players on the leaderboard become captains for that week and draft their own team. So each week you can be on a different team. There are 4 teams, 11 players per team, so there are 44 players. And the league starts in February for 6 weeks, in which we would hope, more players will want to stay home and play in this league. Yes.
Yeah. We'll be right back. Next, I sit down with a world-class figure skater and Olympic medalist, Adam Rippon. I'm here with Adam Rippon, the first openly gay athlete to represent the US and bring home a medal at the Winter Olympics. His memoir, Beautiful on the Outside, chronicles the physical and mental stamina it takes to reach that elite level, all with his signature sense of humor. Adam, how you doing?
I'm fantastic.
You have written a book since the last Olympics. You have been coaching. What has life been like for you over the last few years?
Well, since I competed at the Olympics in 2018, I've tried to take advantage of every opportunity that's come my way. Most of the stuff that I do now is like entertainment-based, which, listen, I'm a ham and I love it, and it's something that I've always loved to do. And as a competitor, my favorite part of competing was the performance aspect of my sport. I actually didn't really love competing, but I did love performing. I also have coached a little bit. I worked with a former training mate of mine. We worked together for the past few years. She qualified for the games in 2022, and she even won a national title.
Which is a huge accomplishment.
It was huge. I was so lucky to be a part of that.
You meant a lot to a lot of people being out at the Olympics. That was a big deal. Like there was you, there was Gus Kenworthy. Have you gotten a little bit of a sense of exactly what kind of impact you've had in your sport?
You know, the moment of going to the Olympics and being an out athlete, it wasn't something I ever thought about doing. You know, like it never was like, I want to go to the Olympics and I want to be out. It actually came about after not qualifying for an Olympics in 2014. Those Olympics were in Sochi, Russia, and right before the games, they had this proclamation that gay propaganda was illegal. But it was the first time, which shows how much privilege I've been able to live with my own life, that I felt like just because I'm me, it could be illegal. I didn't know if I were to go to that Olympics, if I'd be putting friends or teammates or family in danger. And it didn't end up mattering because I didn't qualify. But it
had an impact on you.
A huge impact on me, because while I was continuing to compete, I was like, you know what, I want to redo all of these things that I wish that I had done differently. And I wish I had said something, and I wish I had shared who I was publicly before that Olympics, and I never did. And so it was really important to me. I didn't know at that point if I would still continue or try to make an Olympic team 4 years after that, but I knew in that moment it was important for me to share that aspect of myself.
Right.
And I guess we're talking like, that's almost 8 years ago. And it was a totally different landscape for LGBTQ plus athletes.
Yes.
There was very limited representation. And then when I found out that I would be, like, based on scheduling, the first openly queer athlete in the Winter Games representing the United States.
Right, because Gus qualified a few weeks after you or something?
And I would compete first. I would compete before he would compete. So this is all scheduling based. But it was just something I had never thought of. And I don't think that in that moment, I truly realized how big that was.
Right. You were out for a certain period of time while you were still competing, and you were traveling, going to different countries. What was it like for you to be an out athlete abroad?
I think the only time I ever was worried was traveling to Russia.
Yeah.
And as an out person, I had only been to Russia once. I think what made my experience a good experience, a positive one, was that I worked with some Russian coaches, and I went to Russia with a Russian person. And I knew that that person, that coach that I went with, would always make sure that I was safe and I was around good people. And it made my experience a good and a positive one. And it reminded me that, as difficult as it can be sometimes, that it's very important to separate the Russian government from the Russian people.
Yes, absolutely. Do you think that athletes who are LGBTQ, who are going to countries that have anti-gay laws, anti-trans laws, Should there be more support for these athletes?
100%. Because I think if you're an athlete going to a competition, you're a representative of your country and of the sports body that you represent. I think that the organization and the government behind you should make sure that you are protected. The athlete is not going there to be a spokesperson. That's not their job, but a lot of times it is left into the hands of the athlete to say something.
You know, what's interesting as I'm listening to you talk, I'm going, oh, right, this is Adam Rippon, the person who, well, not just that, but the person who spoke out against Mike Pence, right? And we're talking about athletes abroad, but you spoke out against the vice president, the then vice president of your own country. You're coming at this from a place of experience.
I remember I was flying while the election was happening in 2016. That really changed a lot for me. Because the Trump of it all felt like people I knew didn't care what happened to somebody like me. And that made me so angry. It made me so sad. It made me so scared. I realized that if there was something that was important to me, that I wanted to talk about it. And I remember that I got asked about Mike Pence being head of the athlete delegation. And in that moment, I was like, I can either answer this honestly, or I can go, you know, I don't really want to talk about it. And so I answered it honestly. And I was like, I don't agree with it. Mike Pence doesn't represent me. I don't think he represents my values. I don't think he should be representing the athletes.
Right.
And I was able to have like an amazing Olympic experience because I was true to myself and I was honest. I was just trying to be honest.
You got to travel a whole bunch as a figure skater. You went to international competitions. You even went on Tinder internationally at times. Do you have a favorite moment, a favorite thing that you got to do? Like, what did you get out of that?
My sport has led me in so many different directions and to so many different places. But yes, I'm going to go back to Tinder because at an international competition, obviously I was very focused if I was on Tinder.
Right, obviously.
Obviously. It was before the competition. So I was on Tinder, which is basically a video game. And I met in Finland my now husband. And because of skating, truly, it led me to this city outside of Helsinki, Espoo. And in that city, I was in the right mileage from the person I would end up marrying. So through sport is how I met my husband. And I would have to say that is my favorite memory.
Yeah, if you hadn't said that, honestly, I would have been judging you probably.
Yeah, so would my husband.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'd probably be not happy.
All right, so dating abroad as an athlete, 10 out of 10, would recommend.
Would recommend.
Adam, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. This has been fantastic.
In Russia, a top WNBA player can make up to $1 million per season. Matthew, obviously, diving doesn't quite work that way. But if you were given the option, right? If you could dive for Russia and you were offered that kind of money, would you go?
In a heartbeat. So I would not have made $130,000 from my federation in my entire career. So it just I find it hard to, to conceptualize these sums, but because, obviously $1 million would mean a lot. I mean, it means a lot to anybody. That sounds like a lot of money. And you would like to hope that, with $1 million, you could, pay 20,000 of that on a security person if things were that dire.
From what I understand, you have actually had to hire security when diving abroad, right? You've done that before.
So I got asked to compete at a Grand Prix in Qatar in 2009, the year after I very famously, won an Olympic gold medal as a very gay person. And knowing that the laws in Qatar, there are at least 4 laws specifically against LGBTQ people. And so I didn't know whether or not I would be arrested on the spot or, whether I'd be safe. So I actually sought legal advice before I went. And the legal advice was basically, go, you'll be fine, just don't wave a rainbow flag around, which is fine. And, for those who are in the know, for LGBTQ people there, hopefully just seeing me there in their country and competing and being successful would be some sort of consolation in some way.
Yeah. It's crazy you talk about Qatar, because in 2019, we in track and field actually had world championships there. I was injured, but a friend of mine, she actually ended up wearing a rainbow bracelet or anklet, something like that, where she forgot that she even had it on and ended up making a demonstration without even realizing it.
Wow.
And how much backlash she got from it was absolutely insane. To the point that I was like, whoa, when I had to go there for a track meet earlier this year. And like you said, not waving, the rainbow flag or trying to do or say anything that would draw attention. Because, at least, world championships or a World Cup or something like that, teams have said security. But, when you're at a track meet, it's not really too much security that we may have or protections.
Yeah, it is difficult competing in countries with such contrasting cultures and laws to our own. And particularly the Qatar example, the laws are quite ambiguously worded, and so it's illegal to lead or promote in any way, to lead an LGBTQ kind of lifestyle or to encourage anyone to be like that. And so just like that, the little ankle bracelet, that would be against the law. And I wonder if any person who goes to Qatar to watch the World Cup, just by being openly identifying, because they can check your computer, your social media, all of that sort of stuff. And so just by identifying, are you encouraging or leading somebody else to be LGBTQ? So, that's why it's kind of really dangerous to have such big events in these kinds of countries, because you can't control how somebody else is going to interpret the law.
Leading up to the 2022 World Cup, players protested Qatar, the host country. Raven, are we going to see more athletes do these kinds of protests on the global stage?
Oh, yeah, 100%. One thing that I admire about this next generation coming up is the fearlessness when it comes to fighting back against things that they feel isn't right. And that's why I'm happy to be a part of this, this newfound, coming of activists, people that are willing to put themselves on the line for what is right and what's coming up next. And I can't wait to see it.
We get told as athletes before we go to the Olympics, we get told in no uncertain terms that you are not allowed to make any political stand, that the Olympics is apolitical. There's a really good reason behind it. And I think it's that, because if you allow, one person to make a political statement, so say, for example, we would be supporting LGBTQ rights. And if we use our international platform like that, then that means that everybody's allowed to use that platform. And there are some people with some really, really funky, beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And meaning that it can go both ways.
Exactly.
Right.
And so should we be amplifying those kinds of, people with really kind of heinous views? I don't think so. So it is really difficult.
How I ended up wiggling my way out and around the whole protest was that I actually made a demonstration. So when I raised my arms in the form of an X on the
When you got yourself a medal,
yeah,
right?
on the podium stand, it was already after the Olympic ceremony, the medal ceremony had ended. So they had already played the national anthem. At this point, now it's time for the photo session, where now we're just taking pictures. So you can have fun with it, but I used that moment to raise my arms, and that was a way that I got to avoid the whole protest. And also when I spoke out about it, what I said was that this is for all people who are a part of the LGBTQ community, all people who are Black, all people who face mental health challenges, and all people around the world who face oppression. So I wasn't necessarily protesting anything. It was a demonstration and more so about raising awareness of these specific groups that don't really have that much notoriety, or people weren't necessarily talking too much about it.
Right, you found a way to kind of wiggle around those rules just a little bit.
You know, got to beat them at their own game.
Number of times that you've winked at me, my God. We'll be right back. Next, we head to Florida to meet with a queer member of a college sailing team and the coach who's inspiring him every day. Welcome back. We traveled down to Eckerd College in Florida to meet with a lesbian sailing coach and a gay male student athlete to learn about how they use sailing as an escape. Take a look.
My name is Caroline Young. I'm the head coach at Eckerd College. Sailing started for me at age 9. My family moved to Tampa and we lived on a small island called Davis Island. My parents said the day I came home from sailing camp, I was grinning ear to ear and I was like, I love this. I race sunfish now as an adult, and I just came back for the 2022 Sunfish Worlds in Italy. I was the second female overall, so top American female. And it was a big accomplishment to meet. It's been like a really wild campaign this past year of just, trying it out and putting in the work. I was an All-American when I was a sophomore and won my division at college nationals. The difference between when I was in college sailing and what I'm just observing now, I didn't know a single queer athlete when I was in college. You know, I think we were all closeted. I don't even know if we knew we were queer at the time. The 4 years of college were the hardest years of my life. Everybody says college is the best 4 years. Okay, imagine coming out of that and being like, oh, that was it? Yikes. I think it's the time where it's such a great opportunity for a young adult to have someone they can trust, or to have places where they can sit and cry in a chair or whatever it is. The Triton staff for sailing is myself as head coach and then assistant coach Ainsley Paramore. And it's been amazing to have her here this season. I think it was a completely natural way that the leadership team came together, and it's also amazing to be working with another queer coach. And I think it really also has, in a lot of ways, made the SASA district itself feel more inclusive.
My name is Brooke Jordan, and I'm this year's co-captain of the Eckerd College sailing team. So having two openly queer coaches has been really tremendous for my own athletic passions and pursuits, because when I'm coming to practice, I'm able to literally just focus on practice. I'm not worried about what so-and-so is thinking about, or I'm able to really focus on developing myself as a sailor. And I think that's something that I'm lucky and fortunate to have. Ready?
The way I've looked at the things that are happening in Florida, especially with Governor DeSantis, is people that I've known and held true to me for a really long time, we start to see their political stance more and more. It's very, I would just say disorienting sometimes to see the way that people feel about things like the Don't Say Gay bill and things like that.
Across Florida, confusion continues to grow. That new law went into effect yesterday. Kelsey Thornton explains why some educators are concerned that it will force them to change the way they teach.
There's always a deep fear that people think that I'm an inappropriate person to be working with kids.
Looking out for our kids first and foremost. And I'm telling you, in Florida, we've been proud to do that.
It's almost like you feel like you're gonna step on a landmine.
So we're going to the SASA Championships, which is our conference championships for the fall. We're gonna be competing at Lake Virginia, which is in Winter Park, Florida, hosted by Rollins College. And we're hoping to get top 5. And with that top 5 placement, sets us up for good picks for the spring, and also a chance to get to nationals.
Definitely go get them. They're have fun. The format for this regatta is fleet racing. Fleet racing is kind of like any race, like if you're a runner. All of the boats start on the line at the same time, and it's just who finishes first wins. There are 18 boats, and it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way down. Good morning, everybody. I am, and I know Coach Ainsley we're very inspired by the way that we sailed yesterday, and I mean way that we sailed, meaning our attitude. We held it together. Our mental game was on point all day long. I think we're growing in a big way. So, and we have one last day of races. Come on in. All right, Brooks.
Super loud.
Trojans on 3! 1, 2, 3, Trojans!
This venue is really known for like lake sailing and just being really shifty and unpredictable. So a lot of it is assessing conditions while you're on the water and trying to make plays and strategy kind of in the moment. It's just being the first one to understand what the change is or what the shift is and being the first one to execute plays to accommodate for those changes.
So we're right on the edge of the top 5, which is what we hope to be. And we'll see. We have one race left to see on the scoreboard. It really feels like, I mean, we know you guys, right? But it feels like a different team showed up this weekend.
Yeah.
And not a different, I mean, the work that we've put in the last 8 weeks of honestly like the mental and emotional stuff, I think has just launched us into a different category. And I'm really, really happy about it. And I don't know that all the teams around here have the foundation that we do to now build the skills on it.
You know, like this is just the beginning.
There is a big impact when we treat ourselves like human beings who need care and who also want to perform at their best, right? And it doesn't always boil down to doing the right drills. We're in a lifted up district and at a lifted up school, so, you know, it's a good place to be.
Thank you to all of these amazing panelists for telling me about your experiences abroad. I have one last, fun question for you guys. I'm just wondering, when you go and compete abroad, like, where's your favorite place to go?
Monaco.
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 You were so ready for that.
Listen, I say this every time. There's no other place that you can go and like go to the boat dock and like a $3 million boat look cheap. Like that was the craziest thing to me. And we got a chance to compete right by the docks.
You like spectacle.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. And you can catch like a helicopter ride from the airport to the hotel. Come on.
How about you, Ty?
I would have to say Brazil or Israel because they're both warm weather and I hate the cold.
Yeah.
So those two countries for sure.
Cool.
And they were very welcoming.
I always loved going to China. Like, it's just so culturally different. It just feels like you're being in a completely different world. It's, I love that.
My favorite place in the whole world to go to is New York City.
Really?
I think there's an energy that New York fans have and an energy of the city. Maybe if you live here all the time, you start to take it for granted. But I swear I feel it as soon as I get off the plane. And the chance to cover the WNBA here in the city back when the Liberty were playing in Madison Square Garden, now they're at Barclays Center, are some of the coolest games I've ever been to. Because it's that New York attitude, and when they get behind their teams, it's really fun to watch.
The Garden is the best.
All right.
Yeah,
all right. I like that. Thank you so much to you all for joining us. We'll see you next time.